Hello to everybody, my name is Stefano and welcome to this episode of the Think and Analyze podcast. Today we are dealing with the question, should you be in your head or in your body? Now, to clarify what I mean with this, being in your head means to be in your mind and thus rational. Being in your body, on the other hand, means to follow your instincts, to be in a state where you do what feels right at an emotional level. So, for example, if I'm dealing with a problem for which I have to find the best solution, I'm in my head. I am rational in order to critically analyze the situation and find a solution. So, like, if they tell me to build a bridge which has to be economic and safe, that's a situation where I'm in my head. Instead, if I happen to be in a situation where I want to express some kind of affection for somebody, I'm in my body. It's not that I analyze the situation and think, what can I do to show affection? I simply go for what feels right. For instance, if I meet a close friend I haven't seen for months, I want to hug them, so I do that. I don't think about anything, I simply do it. That's a situation where I am in my body. Now, why would you want to know the answer to the question? Merely because it could help you to be more at peace psychologically, and you'll understand what I mean towards the end of this episode. Before I get into the explanation, I want to point out two things. Firstly, these ideas come from the books The Language of the Body and Bioenergetics, both by Alexander Lowen. I highly suggest everyone to read them because although they regard the field of psychology and psychotherapy, Alexander Lowen is a psychotherapist. I believe they contain many concepts that can help you even in your everyday lives. Secondly, I'm not in any way a specialist or a psychologist. What I'm about to say is only about my personal experience, basically. Now, the answer to the question depends, of course, on the situation and on who you are and what you tend to do most of the time. Since I don't have much experience, as I said, with other people, I'll talk about myself. And additionally, I will tell you an hypothesis I made, which is very interesting to me. So, a few years ago, during the first and the second year of high school, I wasn't actually aware of how I behaved when I was with other people. And I guess that's also normal because I was still very young. During that time, I found on YouTube the topic of body language, which I was curious about. In my head, it was like getting to know how to understand the people's intentions and thoughts. Basically, I felt that it was like reading their minds. Now, to a degree, that is true, but that degree is way lower than I thought. And by the way, when I say body language, I mean all that kind of all that information regarding, like for example, crossing your arms. What does that what it means? Shifting towards the door when someone is talking to someone else in a room. What does that mean as well? Like I don't say giggling with your feet and all that stuff. By the way, if you want to, this is not sponsored, of course. If you want to read a very interesting book about body language, I highly suggest you to read What Everybody is Saying by Joe Navarro. That being said, video after video, I slightly shifted towards the topic of self-improvement. After some time, I realized that I was not in a situation I actually wanted to be. As a matter of fact, I started to feel like I wasn't considerate that much when it came to social interactions. Now, it's not that I was bullied, let's be clear. Rather, when I was with other people, I sort of created a character that looked like a little weak or naive, because I almost wanted to make people laugh while also being, from time to time, the center of attention. Although this sort of facade led me to my main objectives, the side consequences were not desirable. In fact, I believe people really considered me naive when actually I was not that much, and so they tended not to consider me when dealing with more serious topics. Moreover, I didn't show who I actually was. And I guess didn't even know them myself because I had never taken that aspect into consideration. I believe it was as if nobody felt they knew me. Plus, being a little bit insecure because of my parents' education, I believe I wasn't getting involved that much in social activities, especially those which involved being in groups. That's very complicated to explain for me because I honestly don't know exactly everything. These are just my assumptions based on what I'm able to remember. The general gist, however, was that I was almost in my own bubble and I didn't do the normal things my peers did, both in terms of social life, but also in terms of my mental state when I was interacting with others. Because, as I said, I was creating that sort of facade. I believe that usually people don't do that, or at least they don't do that as much as I did. So, after having realized all of this, I was quite shocked. First of all, I felt like my true, new, and we could say aware self was stuck inside of me, was stuck inside of the facade I had created. Second, I began to feel bad when people did something without me, partially because I thought they were avoiding me, because I believe they like knew that that I had put on a facade for the preceding years, but mostly because they seemed to have the fun I was missing. Third, I had no idea what to do next, and I became extremely conscious about my actions. That was actually quite a bad period. And that was when I really started to be almost only in my head, overthinking things, trying to think about the right move to do, trying to think how to act with others so that they could like me more, and all those kind of things. So after becoming conscious about what I had done in the past, I was now super conscious about myself, and thus, like I said, only in my head. As a side note, I believe my situation was tough also because I was now trying to find what to do, how to behave, and what I actually liked, whereas my peers had already been through that phase in the preceding years at the beginning of the high school. As a matter of fact, I guess that in those first 2 years, when they were getting to know each other, my classmates basically, the group, because of its bigger entity, led them to be more safer when trying to learn things. They didn't feel so conscious about themselves because everyone was in the same situation. On the other hand, I was now like alone trying to figure out things on my own. Okay, now that I was in my head almost all the time, and I really want to stress this, I really was all the time overthinking things. And so I was trying to logically resolve the situation. I watched so many videos on YouTube on a number of topics. The main ones were like how to be liked by people, how to have good conversations, how to make people laugh, so on and so forth. Um, I became also interested in psychology for the sake of understanding how people worked so that I could reach my goal as soon as possible. And this is when I came across the books I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. I started to read the first, and after some weeks, I went for the second. And I'm glad I did. Page after page, I began to understand the author's theory of how the mind and the body are different aspects of the same unit, both influencing each other. As a consequence, somatic characteristics can be linked to psychic ones and vice versa. When talking specifically about the mind and the body, the author made it clear that oftentimes people are excessively in their head, which leads to a loss of contact with the body. As a consequence, these people tend to be excessively rational and to feel less emotions, which of course is unhealthy and ultimately leads to being lifeless. I realized that to a degree I was in that situation. Luckily, I was not in a devastating situation, of course, like other people sadly find themselves sometimes. However, the principle was the same. I was too in my head, too conscious of everything, and thus I was not feeling very well. At this point, I like knew my problem, but I didn't know how to address it. And now I will talk about the hypothesis I made. In one of the books, I believe The Language of the Body, I can't remember exactly, the author made a list of some somatic characteristics which, in his opinion, might be linked to a specific psychic situation. Specifically, there was one thing that struck me. In the author's opinion, since the hands are what we use to interact with the external world, having very cold hands could be linked to a repression of the need to reach out to the world. And I honestly believed it was my case to some extent. In fact, I used to have cold hands even during summer. I always had them. Every time I touched somebody, they told me, "Oh, your hands are so cold." And so, after reading that part, I thought to myself, I related to what the author was saying. So I thought to myself that maybe I had to listen more to my feelings, to my gut, we could say, and try to interact with the world in a way that I had never done. As a matter of fact, I realized that many times when I wanted to do something fun a little bit out of the ordinary, I was scared of how people would react. I was scared that people would think badly of me. I believed that one had to be as normal, which, by the way, who knows what normal is, as possible. But in believing that, I repressed myself. I repressed my body, my emotions. Now, why do I say that I believe that specific case about the hands and reaching out to the world was my case, was my situation? Because after that epiphany, I started to do the things I genuinely wanted. I started to feel my body. I never repressed my, we could say, behavioral inclinations again. And I never had those awkward cold hands again ever since. I guarantee you. That was something that really hit me because cold hands were always something I was conscious about. And after that, I never had those cold hands again. I was really happy with this. So, in the end, to answer the question, I believe one has to be both in their head and in their body. However, be aware that many times in the society we live in, we tend to shift unconsciously towards the mind. At least this is the opinion of the author, which I agree with. I want to repeat the titles of the books in case someone wants to read them. The Language of the Body and Bioenergetics. There are many more actually, but I guess those are more introductory to the topic. So I always say this, but I really hope I helped you. And with that said, see you guys.